Hello SGD, Sacred Geometry Decoded, and this will be part 8 in the series looking at connections from the Pentagram. And there are multiple, I'll put all the links to previous episodes in the description. There's a playlist I'm making as I go along as well. But, the applications and the connections that people make with it are pretty much endless. So let's look, so most of the focus of this has been about the weights and measure systems embedded in them. So there is very important famous gods. So Thoth in Egypt, Hermes in Greece, Mercury in Rome, bringers of knowledge. The gods of weights and measures are all the gods of knowledge. And so again, weights and measures, and this has been some individual episodes covering this. So we've covered we'll touched on the ruler, but the compass, and we'll get back to the ruler because that has so many applications to it, and the clock as well. We've done some of that, but there's more again to come because that will connect as well. And the last previous episode, episode 7, was on temperature scales. But there's another scale, and that's the scales of weight, weights and measure. We measure time, we measure temperature, we measure length, area or volume, and we measure direction with the compass. But now we measure weights. And so from the previous episode, this looking into the weights, and it's like 273 and these multiple other connections. And if we go to, she's freezing up. But now we'll be looking at weights. Now, trust my computer to freeze up at this moment. Okay, sorry about that. Now, previous episode was on temperature and these connections which would come from this, but now especially keep in mind 273, but also the Newton scale of boiling water, and there's a nice one to begin with there. So weights and measures and the scales. So back to 273. Now this is 1 troy ounce. When they quote the value of gold and silver, what they're talking about is not the avoirdupois ounce, which is a measure of especially foodstuffs. What they're talking, which is 28.3 grams, when they talk about 1 ounce of gold or silver, what they mean is the troy ounce. That's for measuring precious metals, especially. That works out to be 480 grains. Now, you don't often hear grains too much. Maybe if you're like when they talk about gunpowder, they still reference grains, but 1 grain is 31.1035 grams instead of a 28.3 grams. If you're buying foodstuffs, that's the measure that they use. The troy ounce is slightly heavier, and especially Newton being an alchemist is a nice link there. But 1 troy pound. Also the apothecaries weight, which is also apothecaries were the pharmacists and alchemists, and 1 pound being 373.24 grams in the modern speak. There was a slight variation in the measure of grains. I forget the exact date, not too long ago, but that would possibly account for the variation with a grain and the standard international system of weights and measures. But the troy ounce, the pound, is also 373.24, which is a nice link to there, but just as I mentioned, because the history there was a slight change in the official grain, and that could account for this, because again, you multiply this number out, and that 0.09 of a gram could be included in that variation. But back to weights and measures, and so 360 or 0, but 72, 144, 216 and 288. The pentagram, upwards facing pentagram. We're going to do more on the inverted pentagram because that includes 36, 108, 180, 252. And these will join up very, very nicely with already just what we've seen so far. But back to this 273, Kelvin being where water freezes, or 0C, and negative 273 Celsius being absolute zero in the Kelvin scale. Now keep in mind the grain, the weights and measures of the grain, but firstly let's go back to ancient times and let's begin with the Romans. So this will also include Grecian and Roman weights. But here we see this is from the 1812 Abraham Rees Cyclopedia. Just to make it a little bit clearer, so what we see is 36 as in 360, 72 as in 72 degrees. These are systems of weights and measure. Now, because of the base 12 system and that they're using, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that these numbers would come up, because this was like the 12-inch foot and stuff. They were using 12-inch the uncia back then as well. But so 144 is in 144 degrees, and also 288 as in 288 degrees there on the pentagram. What's missing is 216, but that will pop up. So also now, this is again from Abraham Rees Cyclopedia. Ancient Roman weights reduced to the English troy weight, and so English grains. Now firstly we have again 36 for 3,600, 7,200, so 36, 72, 144, and 288. But also what we have is 144 when we convert to the English grains. Now if you invert the pentagram, the first angle will be 36 degrees, the second angle will be 108 degrees. So 108 degrees is one of the defining angles of both the pentagram and the pentagon. But that's the, we'll get back to those eventually. So in these weights and measure systems, this again just pops up now, another one. And so again, English grains, where we see them, and now especially I have to be careful how I say that, the Quin, C-U-N-X, I'm not going to mispronounce that one. Okay, but that's 2,160 grains, so 216. So we, just in this Roman weights and measure systems, we see we're incorporating this and this geometry and the math and the astronomy and the music scales as well. So much emerges from this pure geometry and that very cool system. But now let's focus on the number 273, which we saw and have spoken a bit about earlier. Now firstly, the Roman system of, so what they would have a sacred amphora, like one of these sort of jug things, and they would fill it with water, and that would give the official weights and measures. Now dry and liquid, so liquid, we fill it with liquid, but dry measures as well, you would fill it with grain, for instance, and that's where grains comes from. This has been since across cultures since antiquity, using wheat or barley or different types of grain because they're so similar, of similar size and of weight, and that was used as a way of developing standardized weights and measures. But 273 millimeters, the Hermina or the Catila. So nice link there. But the Roman ounce, which is also the Greek ounce, was 27.3 grams, or 432 English grains. 432 binds is half of that, so a half ounce is 216 English grains. Keep that in mind. 27.3 grams over the Roman ounce. Now the Spanish doubloons, pieces of 8, so 27.3 grams, or 8 cob. Now what pirates and other people would do was cut it into 8 pieces, or a cob. Now in America you have the quarter coin referred to as 2 bits. Well, you cut this into a quarter, you get 2 cob, 2 bits, and that's why it's a $quarter, because the American silver dollar is 27.3 grams also. This is now 27.3 grams or 8 cob. Now what's interesting is that whether it's this, for instance, this token issued by the Bank of Montreal, 1835, but that's 27.3 millimeters in diameter, or 8 grams, 27.3 and 8. Now the English 50p piece is 8 grams or 27.3 millimeters. This system is, now coinage is, since ancient times, or money, is at the heart of power. It's like there is the ability to define weights and measures. That's the scepter and the orb of the king going back to antiquity. But still to this day, the ability to issue currency or define weights and measures is the power of powers, so to speak. Just like Thoth, Hermes, Mercury, gods of weights and measures. And also alchemical connections, because making silver and gold coins, well, it's a no-brainer. But now, what's also interesting is that ancient coins going back to Roman times, well, 2.64 by 273 millimeters in diameter, or 8 grams. So now what happens is that very, very often you'll see these coins, ancient coins, being 27.3 millimeters. The metric system was used, how do these things come now? This particular coin is a half ounce, or 13.66, which, half of 27.3, but has a 27.3 millimeter diameter. And that's, as we'll see, because now Ptolemy during one of the generals of Alexander split up Alexander's empire. Ptolemaic Egypt was essentially Ptolemaic Greece, where you see these Greek symbols, but yeah, it was what's often referred to as ancient Egyptian is actually Ptolemaic. So there's Egyptian influence, but it's strong Greek connections. But those coins were also 27.3 grams. Now, why that's interesting is because we'll bring back the half ounce of 13.6 grams. The gold deben in ancient Egypt, talking at least around about 2500 BC, was 13.6 grams. This was also a standardized weight, so when you went to buy a portion of grain, for centuries the price was fixed and standardized, but one gold deben is 13.6, or a half ounce of 27.3. But the copper deben was 27.3 grams in ancient Egypt around the year 2500 BC, while in Mohenjo-Daro over in Harappa, and what they found were these cubes, and because the cubes have been chipped, it changes the weight, but they've studied hundreds and hundreds of them and found that the average is 27.3 grams, or 13.6 and then 6.8. So 13.6, and you divide that again, 6.88. But these ancient Indus scales comes to 27.3. The copper deben of the Old Kingdom in Egypt, 27.3 grams. 27.3 grams in Egypt, and the Roman scales up until the modern times, and it's still new special coins are minted at 27.3 grams, and this 273, and these number connections. Now the avoirdupois system, as I mentioned, this is the ounce that most people would refer to, 28.3495 grams, as where the troy ounce is 31.1034. But anyway, even though, it still comes, 1 dram is 27.34375 grains. And this ounce system is, instead of built on 12, it's built on 16, but 27.3, all of these measures, now even you might notice this, it's the metric system, and the imperial, going back to ancient times, just have these, you can't make it up. This is, I didn't do this, you can check these things for yourself. These systems and all connect, and especially so the pentagram and some of its geometry and the mystic traditions, religious traditions, and the history of weights and measures. The wisdom of Thoth, Hermes and Mercury, bringers of knowledge, gods of weights and measures and the geometry and the what can you say? Previous episodes and connecting, because it's time, its length, its degrees of the compass, its degrees of the thermometer, and we still haven't got to pressure, and also to modern computing. I mentioned binary code, how the palindromes emerged from there in the earlier episode, but and there's so much more still to come in regards to astronomy as well. Measures of distance, measures of time, measures of angles, measures of weight and pressure, sun, earth, moon, stars and the planets, all comes together around this system. You can't make it up. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this episode. Still more to come. Have a good one.